And as usual, it's kind of, remember when you're starting a whole new scene, you just go to General, right? So when you're starting a whole new scene, you just click on General, and that'll drop in that default cube. I'm going to make sure my Blender size for the screen's a little smaller, right? So my students here can see it. There we go. It's actually kind of nice to have the clouds today, making it a little easier to see the screen. It's all right. So we've got Blender open. And what we really wanted to do is, like I said, I wanted to just kind of take the time to build a room with you guys, right? So it's going to probably be like about 10 minutes of lecture today, and then I'll quickly create the quiz, go over the quiz with you guys, and then I'll let you guys go to asynchronous for like, the half hour we usually have, and I'll come back for like the last 10 minutes, and I'll just do a little bit of review stuff on what we did today, and get that video uploaded for you guys. Obviously, videos were loaded from before we went to holiday on Wednesday, and yesterday was just kind of work day, right? Because like I said, I wasn't really here, mostly because of a physical aspect with my shoulder and neck. I've been having issues with this slightly lately. So I wasn't sick, but I was definitely not in a great place to be here using a mouse. So, and I kind of need that, right? So yeah, took one of my sick days. All right. So, of course, we have our default cube here. And in this case, that's fine because we have our room started up. And Blender's ability to draw straight polygons is pretty good, but it's, I'd say that mine is like probably slightly better in that regard, actually, for the most part. In my opinion, it's kind of one of the few things you'll ever hear me say about Maya being better than Blender, because usually it's the other way around. Even though Maya is fairly good, widely used in the industry. But I did want to start to talk to you guys a little more about Extrude Manifold and Extrude, whichever way you want to use those tools. And I also want to start to talk to you guys about these snapping tools, right? Because Blender's snapping tools are quite good. And so today, it's going to be pretty easy because it's going to be mostly box modeling for our room, stuff like that. Briefly, I did want to remind you guys about the add-ons, right? They were in the last video. So if you go to add-on preferences, right, you should be able to click on the add-ons button here and turn on the add-ons that you want to have available, right? In this case, some of the ones I really like to have on, obviously, UV layout's a good one to have on. Let's see. Edit mesh tools, loop tools, I like having those on as well. You just check them. That's all you have to do to turn them on is just check those. There's some other cool ones in here. There is AutoMirror, which is pretty cool. If you guys want to check that one out, it makes kind of setting up your symmetry a little bit faster and easier. There's also some other cool ones like, I want to say that's the modifier tools is for applying. Yeah. Modifier tools is cool because it kind of gives you an apply all feature. I'll keep those off for now. We'll talk about them a little bit later on. I want you to try to learn as much of vanilla Blender as you can before we turn a few add-ons on. But it's a little easier to get to some of these guys here with these. So just kind of remind you guys about that. Because one of the things I want to do is you'll see there's this kind of little kind of a sideways V right here, right? Kind of right here on the side. It's really hard to see on the projector, but it's right there. It's kind of a little V that's coming out there. If you click on that, that brings up this, right? And right now, it's really just kind of stuff for object level. But if I say go to 3 for faces, and all faces are selected, right? Because remember, Blender's pretty good about kind of whatever selection you have. When you switch to a different mode, it converts it to that other mode selections, which is I love. But you'll now notice there's an extra option here called Edit, right? Edit. If I click on Edit, you'll see that we have loop tools here and mesh tools available now. And you'll see that there are some face tools, like cut faces. That's pretty cool. We haven't needed to use it yet. There's also utility tools, which has flip normals, right? Flip normals right there. Having said that, that is also in mesh normals flip, right? So if you go to mesh normals flip, you'll see that there. But it is kind of nice to have it right here, right on the open. So I usually just have this open. So I can flip those normals, right? And in this case, you can kind of see they're flipped inward. But if we need to, we can always, come on, catch up. There we go. One of the things you can do is you can turn backface culling on, right? So remember, there's this little kind of V up there, right? Oftentimes you'll see these little Vs. that are either sideways, kind of pointing to the left, or pointing down. Those are little pull-down menus, right? If you click on that V, it opens up some pull-downs. And one of the things you'll see inside that pull-down is backface culling, right? And some of you guys, mostly students I have here today, remember this from Maya. A couple at home, like Dylan and Giovanni. We had that backface culling option in Maya, right? It's in Blender, right? It's right there. So there's just this little kind of V right here, and you can turn backface culling on. And you'll see because I flipped normals that, and I'll just kind of select those really quick. Didn't want to do that, though. I also want to make sure I'm in modeling, of course. So I'm more focused on the modeling interface. There we go. Open that up again. Make sure edit's on, loop tools, mesh tools. There we go. In flip normals, you'll see that I have to kind of turn that back on again, right? Because it is viewport independent, right? So you see when you flip normals, it flips the polygons to face inward, right? And this is actually, I like that did that because you'll notice that these, what's really, really cool is Blender's actual options for what's turned on and even what your quick keys are is actually pretty dependent on the layout you're in as well as even the mode you're in. So that means you can actually use quick keys that you use normally for something else. For the same, you can use the same quick keys in a different view. Like I actually have, when I do sculpting, I'll have my grab set to my same mouse key as tweak, right? It's actually really neat. Once you start to figure out that Blender could do that, it's really, really cool. So you can actually assign the same quick keys to different tools depending on what mode you're in and what layout you're in. It's kind of neat. And even like the specific options here. So that's why when I switch back to modeling, you know, I kind of had to go back in here to turn backface culling on, right? Because that's kind of showing you just one side of the polygon. That's what backface culling means. It means it's showing only one side of the polygon. And flip normals just takes the normal directions of the polygons, and for all intents and purposes, it flips them, right? It's telling the polygons to face inward. And that's what we want for the room, right? Because we're actually eventually going to be inside the room. So great to know that you have flip normals, not only as in your loop and mesh tools here, but if you go to mesh, you'll see there's a normal section that you could flip as well, right? So that's always good to know. And I want to make sure you guys know that. And that this little triangle here gives you a bunch of different options for display stuff, right? You can control the X-ray transparency for the X-ray shading, Alt-X. There's lots of cool little things you can turn on and off here if you want to, right? We've seen that a little bit already, right? That little pull down, it's kind of giving you your options for this stuff, right? But this time I want to talk to you guys and make sure you guys know what backface culling does, right? That it's kind of only showing one side of the polygons. Now, at this point, you know, I'm in 3-face mode, and I could easily grab a face here, and I can hit W, and I just move it over to kind of lengthen out this kind of room here. Now, what if I wanted to do more precision stuff? Like I wanted to actually snap this exactly to the grid units, right? Well, you'll notice right up here, there is a magnet, right? There is a magnet right here. So we have, and we've seen this a little bit, like our global local normal, cursor, view. We've seen things like median point, active element, individual origins a little bit. So these are your abilities to kind of reorient the kind of rotation of your manipulator as well as the position, right? But right next to it is a magnet. And I can click that magnet on. That means the snapping tools are on, right? So that magnet is your snapping tools. And we've actually seen that a bit, right? Remember when we did a bit of our retopologizing for our armor, right? We saw the snapping tools there. Now, if I click on the button next to it, right, that turns the snap tool on, but there's kind of a little button next to it. If I click on this, that is all the options for your snapping tools, right? So we have increment, right? And that actually allows you to snap by increments, right? So it'll kind of snap to kind of whatever increment you've given it, right? So if I go in here, you see increments on, and it's just going to kind of snap it to a certain subtle increment. But you can actually tell it to do absolute grid snap. And what that'll do is it'll snap it to your actual grid units, right? So not only does this come with an ability to actually snap by a specific increment, but it also can just do absolute grid snap. You'll notice that you can actually snap to edges. You can snap to edge centers. You can snap to faces, face centers, right? So believe it or not, once you actually start to play with the snapping tools in Blender, honestly, Maya doesn't even really compete, right? Maya snapping tools just aren't as good as Blender's. Blender's are actually up there with 3D Studio Max's and Moto's snapping tools. So you actually have a really robust set of snapping options here. Some of you guys from Maya remember Grid Snap and Make Live and Vertex Snap, but you can directly snap to faces here in multiple ways, not just Make Live, but that's kind of how you do Make Live also. But even edges and edge centers. So the snapping tools are quite good in here. But we see that we have just that very first one, that very first increment snap. And these tell to use absolute grid. And then it snaps to the grid units themselves, right? So it snaps to the actual units of the grid. So that's great to know. I just wanted to get you guys to see a little bit more of how you can start to use your snapping tools and talk a little bit more about those. At this point, I want some more geometry here. So, of course, I can do Alt-C, right? And I could, because that's loop cut, right? Alt-C is loop cut. And so I can just left-click drag to kind of maybe put this here. There we go. And then, of course, I can go back to my selection tool and make sure to go to 3 for faces, select that face. And, of course, we can extrude, right? Control-E for extrude. And I can just pull it out with that yellow, right? So in this case, it's kind of basically going, it's actually that yellow handle one is for average normal direction, but since this is only one face, the average normal direction is the same as the normal direction, which in this case is exactly along the y-axis, right? And then, of course, I get a W for move. And we can rotate those things, right? So if I want, I could rotate if I wanted to. And one of the things you'll see is you can rotate, but you can also go to the rotate options here and give it an exact degree, right? So if I wanted it to be 25 degrees. So remember, even the move, rotate, and scale tools have options here for how they're going to use the orientation tool, which axis they're going to use. So keep that in mind. In this case, I didn't really want to rotate that. I just wanted to kind of, get that, show that you can do that. So I can go to W, and I can go to 2 for edges, and I can grab an edge. And you see I can move this in, and it snaps to those grid units, right? So kind of neat there, right? It's kind of cool. If you wanted to, you could do some other snapping stuff as well. Like we could try using, say, edge here. And you'll notice that you can actually have it snap to edge center. And, of course, there is an edge center option available as well. And you see how it actually snaps to the center of this set of edges, right? So as I snap it, I should snap to it. Oh, it's not. Make sure, let me see here. Make sure center's on. Let's see. Go. Oh, why are we not doing it? We can always come back to that, though. We didn't really need it for here, but I did want to kind of start to show you guys that there are some other cool options if we want to use those. I just really want to use Snap to Grid right now anyways. But there are some cool options there for doing stuff. And that really, I think the edge center probably needed to work from vertices. So let's see if I go to vertex here. Why are you not snapping? All right. I'll have to take a look at that. But anyways, so that's going to give us snap to grid. You see how it snaps those grid units, which more than anything is what we wanted for this particular project for us anyways. Now, remember, there is the new extrude manifold option as well, right? So that's kind of one of those things that if we really want to, we can actually take and do some cool explorations with as well. So I can go over here, the extrude region tool, and I can go to extrude manifold. And I'll go to 3 for face mode. And remember, I can click and I can extrude this out, right? And you'll see how it automatically dissolves that area, right? And of course, I could turn snap to grid off, and I could switch to this face. And we can extrude here. But one of the things you'll notice is it actually gets rid of that geometry in there, right? Now, if you don't like those edges that are left, those can easily be deleted later on. But this is one of those really, really cool things that this new manifold extrude geometry gives you, right? If I want to kind of bring this one out a little bit, I can, right? And you notice how it dissolves those faces inside of there. And then from there, it's just maybe kind of going to grab these edges, delete, dissolve edges if you want to get rid of those properly. So extrude manifold is kind of neat in the sense that it makes it pretty easy to just kind of get rid of some of that stuff pretty easily. So particularly for like buildings, you'll see the extrude manifold can kind of be cool as like an architectural tool. It's one of those things that some of you guys have ever looked at extrude or SketchUp gives some of that functionality. So I really just want to get us started here today on this, right? I want to show you guys some booleans on this room. I want to show you how to do a more interesting roof. I wanted to do a little bit more with snapping tools as we go on, but like I said, we kind of had to get to a slightly later start today. So snap to grid, though, is kind of the big one I want to go over today, and I'll kind of take a look at what the issue is with the snapped edge. But I wanted to get you guys to see a little more extreme manifold, and that could be pretty cool for this kind of stuff. Like if you're building a character, creature, car, spaceship, don't use that, right? But like, you're working on like the mainframe we saw the other day, and like a room or a building, you might find that extreme manifold's kind of cool, right? It works a lot like this SketchUp tool set. Pretty neat. And we see that snap to grid gives us that ability, particularly when you turn absolute grid snap on, to snap to the grid units. And you can see we basically have the starting point for the room itself, right? So that's what we're starting to build here, is the actual room. So let me just give this a little bit here. All right, let's see. Room. And I'll just call it room, actually, because it's where we're at. All right. Underscore art, Blender file. All right, there we go. That'll be a great place to stop today because it's 9:31. Let me stop the recording here.